So I could have done a video where I screencastified and explained why I still think the Mets are in a good position, even with the loss today. But you know what? Screw it. We're not doing that. We're not fucking doing that. Because this team is playing not good enough to make the playoffs at this current rate with how good the Diamondbacks and Padres are being. So we're just going to walk and rant it out and hope people watch this video. But people might, because there's an angry Mets fan screaming about angry Mets things, which happens every fucking year, it seems. God, I don't even know the last time the Mets had a season where they didn't blow it at the end. It seems every single year they lose in some kind of collapse or some kind of embarrassing fashion. 101 wins, still find a way to embarrass themselves. So with that being said, here is why this team is not playing good enough right now, despite going 6-3 against the Yankees, the Braves, and the Twins. Now, what you have to understand heading into this is that the Diamondbacks actually have a pretty hard schedule to end the year, but the Padres don't. The Mets schedule is of a medium intensity. There are going to be some really tough series and some really easy series. As an example, the Mets still have not played the Chicago White Sox. That should be 3 free wins, with the fact that the White Sox, as of the recording of this video, are somehow at 83 fucking losses. Actually, it might even be 84 now. But there's also 7 games against the Phillies that they have to play. They still got to play the Braves. And even though the Mets briefly caught up and surpassed the Braves, guess what? The Braves are back to being 1.5 games ahead of the Mets. And I really don't think the Mets have it within themselves to surpass them. It will be funny for the one day that the Mets overtook the Braves and the Braves will a 10-game lead over the Mets in the wild card standings. But I don't see that holding out. I think that as far as the, everything goes, I think the Mets have like a medium intensity schedule. You also look at it in the traveling. The Mets have a lot of road trips. The upcoming schedule is not good. And if the Padres and Diamondbacks keep playing the way they are, you got to figure that the Mets have to go at least 8-2 in the next 10 games. You got to figure that. If they keep playing the way that they are, you have to figure on this brutal trip they're going to go 8-2. And of course, people are going to say it's unrealistic and whatnot. Well, guess what? I don't care. This team isn't built like a World Series team. And I get that the Mets are only competing for a wild card spot. That being said, you have to look at the angle of the Padres and Diamondbacks are playing like World Series caliber teams. And the Mets need to somehow come back from still being down 8 against the Phillies to win a division. Do I think it's possible? I think it could be possible, considering the Phillies lost their last 5 series. But then again, you never know. The Phillies could turn it around in an instant. There have been instances where the Phillies have looked fraudulent, only for them to just make a complete 180 on their team. The Yankees, they won 5 in a row after they sucked for a month and a half. I mean, granted, they had a trade deadline, something that the Phillies did not have. But now they could be in some trouble. So, as for this, we're going to look at how the Mets have played ever since the break when they were 49-46. And now they are 57-51. The Mets split their series against the Colorado Rockies. Against the Miami Marlins. They took 2-3 against the Rockies. Splitting with the Marlins, I think, is automatically set the Mets off. Because 6-3, when you would have swept the Marlins, is perfectly fine. 10-3 for the end of July, I'm perfectly fine with. But because they split with them, they're only 8-5 at the end of July, not 10-3. Every game that you lose against the Marlins is a game that you have to win against a good team like the Atlanta Braves or the Minnesota Twins. You also have to look at it as to how unstoppable the Padres have been, with the Padres winning 7 straight games before taking a loss to Baltimore and came back from down 5 against San Diego. And the Diamondbacks have also looked relatively unstoppable. Both of these teams, I think, have only had 2 losses total since the All-Star break. Actually, in the case of the Padres, it might have only been 1 loss since the All-Star break, but I'm not too soon. Now the Padres, they only 12-9 in the month of July, so obviously they're a streaky team because they started off doing terribly. The Diamondbacks are 16-8 in the month of July. The Mets finished the month of July, by the way, with a 17-10 record, which is still pretty good. Not as good as the 16-8 that they were in June, but it's still okay. But the Diamondbacks have been playing unstoppable baseball, and the Mets have to keep up because the Braves are looking good. They've won 4 out of their last 5 games. The Mets have only won 2 out of the last 5 games. So catching up with the Braves, isn't as realistic as we at first might have thought it, could have been, because not only was the series proven to be more difficult than expected, but we also know that the Brewers couldn't help the Mets. And I'm a Cubs fan too, so I really hate the Brewers. This is probably the one time I actually cheered for the Milwaukee Brewers, and they still failed me. Obviously, the Cubs season is pretty much over with them being probably now like 8 games below 500. But still, I think that the Mets are in a position where they are just in a position where, since other teams are doing really good around them, they have to step it up. And then there's obviously this argument of at some point you just have to tip your cap to the Diamondbacks, Padres, whatever. And my response is, at what point? If the Mets finish with 95 wins, they keep winning series and splitting series, they don't take a loss in a series. Which, by the way, calculate that worst case scenario. If the Mets don't lose another series, they'll finish the year at 90 wins. So if they get to 90, 95 wins, at some point, yes. They had a really good season, but other teams around them were doing so good, you have to tip the cap to them. But there's 2 flaws with that argument, I feel like. First of all, getting your players postseason experience is valuable for turning them into contenders. If the Mets want to, first of all, the Mets can make the playoffs and just make a run for it to the World Series. We've seen that the Phillies do that in 2022. We've seen the Diamondbacks do that in 2023. But it also sets them up nicely for sustained runs of success that could eventually result in a World Series title. Second of all, you think about the awards. No one is really winning an award if they don't make the playoffs. I mean, maybe they're first or second round exits, but at least for the regular season awards, they could still win something. After Lindor got robbed of the All-Star, I actually want to see him win MVP. Obviously, I'm not endorsing Carlos Mendoza for NL Manager of the Year, but I think he still might have a chance of it. I think there's a chance, even, and obviously, if they decide to award it with him, I'm not going to complain. I don't personally think he deserves it, especially after what happened in May, but if he's awarded the honor, he's awarded the honor, and I'm going to support my manager if he wins an award, because that's what teams do, that's what fans of teams do. But there's no way they're getting any of that stuff if they don't make the playoffs. Third of all, they'd have to have a really good season where it's almost like you really couldn't expect any more of them, and other teams out there are just so much better that, again, you just have to tip your cap to them. But at what point do I think that is? To me, personally, probably about 91, 92 wins. Because at that point, yes, 92 wins should be enough to get you into the playoffs, especially with there now being 6 postseason seeds. Since they added that, there hasn't been a single team to get to 90 wins that missed the playoffs. Now, the Mariners in 2023, they failed at 88. In the 2021 Mariners at 90 wins actually would have missed the playoffs even if there was a 6th seed, because the Yankees and Red Sox both took the wild card spots at 92. The Blue Jays were next if there was a third wild card with 91. And finally, the National League was supposed to be the easy division. It now seems that, the cutoff of being at a playoff position in both the National and American League is similar, which obviously is really like a good thing. But if the National League is supposed to be the easier league, it's certainly not feeling like it. It's certainly not feeling like it. Again, the National League is is playing at a point where it seems to be that they only make the playoffs. You really got to be like 58, 51-ish at this point. I mean, like, look at the pace that 58 and 51 is going to lead you to. Now, that's 109 games total, which the math on that is complicated. So let's just say 58 and 50 to make the math a little simpler, since that would be 108 games. You then take the win percentage of that, which I'm not, totally sure what it is, but it is about 54 to 55%. You then take what that is against 162 wins, against 162 games. You're realistically going to be getting to about you're realistically going to be getting to about 88 wins. You got to figure that you need 88 wins to make it to the playoffs in the National League. I always said 85, 86. With how good these teams are playing, I think you got to up the ante to 88. And that's the issue. 88 wins, it's tough to make it to the playoffs. It's tough to get 88 wins. And I feel like in the case of the D-backs, their success run will eventually slow down. I mean, the Cardinals were on a good run, and their run slowed down. As an example, same for the Pittsburgh Pirates. But you just gotta think of it in a sense that the Padres, they ain't stopping you. You ain't stopping them. Now, the Mets do play these teams again. But given how the Mets seem to split every single 4-game series they play in, I ain't counting on the Mets to get more than 2 wins against the Padres, which is actually perfectly fine with me because at a 5-2 record against them, we would control a tiebreaker. Not saying it'd be fine with a split for obvious reasons I want the Mets to win, but I'm just saying that the Mets would get the tiebreaker even in spite of that. So I'd be fine with that, in the sense that at least they got the tiebreaker. They only need to win 1 game to get the tiebreaker. The D-backs, though, they must win that series. If the Diamondbacks still look the way they are, Mets are losing the series and therefore losing the tiebreaker, which could be huge in determining who gets into the playoffs and who is watching the playoffs on their couch. Again, the Mets really deserve it. They were a team that was 24 and 35 and sitting in the dumps. At a point, they were 22 and 33, had a 40% win percentage, and were on pace for a mere 65 wins. And now they've taken themselves right into the playoff picture. Nonetheless, would you consider the 2023 Broncos to be a collapse? I would. Because the team was at 1-5 through 6 weeks and looked dead in the water. And obviously they hustled together to get to a 6-5 and later a 7-6 record. And they weren't ever in a playoff spot because they kept losing on tiebreakers. But you could feel the Broncos had a real chance to actually make the playoffs. The Broncos were right in the thick of things. But they finished 8-9 and missed the playoffs completely. And they also took an embarrassing loss to a horrible Patriots team in the process. So again, you got to figure that that even though they were horrible and they were on this run, when they were at 55 and 48 and in the first wild card spot, it would be a collapse to a degree. Obviously, it's not going to live up to 2007 and 2008, the most infamous collapses in Mets history. 2021 was also a historical collapse for the Mets. Led the division for 103 days and didn't even finish with a winning record. That's history. Not going to be as memorable as 2022 when they were the first 100-win team to not even make it to the LDS. Obviously, that's historical. And probably not going to be as bad as 2023 when they were 30 and 27 and looked like they had a chance to make the playoffs, only to go 75 and 87 and completely shit the bed the rest of the way. Nonetheless, even though the Mets might not be, this collapse might not be as bad as the other ones, this still could be a collapse. And I'm only fine tipping my cap to the other team if the other teams deserve it and the Mets truly had no shot. Again, that's about 91 to 92 wins.